clouds at times with a high 83. Rain chances increase a bit tonight. Low 66. Showers again Saturday with a high 81. I'm KNSS meteorologist Dan Holiday.
66, that's where we're at right now. So currently in Wichita, mostly cloudy. Breeze out of the east, 66 degrees. And we have 92% humidity in Wichita here on this Friday morning.
Well, and joining us now is Dr. Roger Marshall. Nice to have you with us here on the morning show. Pleasure. Oh, look at that. Look at Chad, you're a rock star. They're even playing your intro music. I appreciate you guys for joining us this morning. Doc, thank you for joining us this morning. We just had the debt ceiling vote. Passed the House with a vote of 314 to 117 and the Senate 63 to 36. You voted no on the debt ceiling. By the way, thank you for that no vote. I appreciate you joining us this morning, Senator Dr. Roger Marshall. Doc, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, John, thank you. And boy, that rain is welcome news in Kansas this year. You know, as I was thinking about how to vote last night, I said to myself, you know, in the summer where Kansans are going to plow under 1/3 of their wheat crop because it's so dry, in a year when Kansans are spending $800 more per month because of Biden inflation, the last thing we needed to do was throw fuel on the fire. At the end of the day, this budget is going to allow $1.3 trillion more of monies borrowed from our grandchildren, $1.3 trillion more, and doesn't really address the number one problem that faces our national security, our economy, our education system, roads and bridges, and that's our $31 trillion national debt. We're spending $500 billion a year on interest. So they dance around all these issues and they placate you with stories and stories on the national media, but they don't talk about the real problem, and that's the national debt. I'm not willing to pass this on to my grandchildren. I want to face this problem today.
Well, and you and Representative Tracy Mann were the only two members of the Kansas delegation to vote no. And don't get me wrong, as I said earlier when Ted and I were talking, I could make an argument for voting both ways on this bill, but I think it's reasonable to say that most fiscally conservative and pro-growth policies that were contained in the original House-passed Limit, Save, Grow Act were stripped out or significantly diluted in this final deal. So, yes, it's better than what Joe Biden originally wanted, but it's not a very conservative, quote-unquote, compromise bill, is it?
Well, John, I think you make some great points. We did our best to support the framework that Speaker McCarthy laid out. I thought it was a great framework. They ventured pretty far from that. Again, we can add and subtract it. We could talk for 3 hours, but at the end of the day, this makes minimal impact on the total amount of money the federal government is going to spend. They tried to talk about, there's some good regulatory improvements here. When I really dug into those regulatory improvements, I think it's dust in the wind. Work requirements is something we beg for. I think in Kansas, most people think that if you're able to work, you should. We think that work brings dignity to you and your family, that there's this innate calling in your heart to say you want to contribute to society. And at the end of the day, the work requirements actually were more harmful than good that they ended up with. So I think this bill is a failure. It didn't address the real problems that we wanted. We wanted to lower the amount of money we're spending. We wanted work requirements. We wanted regulatory reform. I feel like we got next to nothing on all those. And by the way, let me add this. Last night, as expected, Chuck Schumer came out and said, this doesn't mean we can't borrow more money.
Right.
We can't spend more money in Ukraine. I want to make this real clear that this doesn't mean that we can't spend more money in Ukraine if we need to. So that was very disappointing. You can mark my word that we're going to borrow more money than $1.3 trillion this year, and even more than that next year.
Yeah, that is one of the things that I had a guest on my show last Sunday, and we talked about the fact that it's likely inevitable that sometime soon that President Biden is going to come to you and say, we need to borrow more money to turn around and give it to Ukraine. And don't get me wrong, nobody wants Russia to win in Ukraine. But to ask the American taxpayers to borrow money and then turn around and give it away is ludicrous. And one of the other things that really frustrated me about this deal is the fact that you essentially, and you didn't, but that they essentially gave up the 87,000 IRS agents. I mean, why? It's like a $1 $1 billion cut or something. Why bother? Just give them the whole package.
Right. Yeah, it was another talking point. But I want to bring up the bigger picture here. Keep going back to the bigger picture. We're going to borrow $1.3 trillion from my grandchildren, but do nothing for the border. And that's
true.
Why last night we offered an amendment that basically would have taken that did take the House bill that passed that would have secured the border. We put that on the floor last night as one of the 11 amendments offered, and it went down. The Democrats voted against securing our border. And I got to tell you, John, when I go back home, people are almost numb to the inflation right now. They don't even bother telling me. They're just, like I said, numb is the best description I can describe. But when my own folks in the home I grew up in are concerned about their safety and security in El Dorado, Kansas, when folks in your listening audience are concerned about their safety and security, when fentanyl is killing 300 people, young adults across our nation, the number one killer of young adults, then we got a problem that this president won't face, and why Congress would not add something. All we needed was a small, like $6 billion would have really made a big dent in our border security. We couldn't even get that to pass the Senate last night.
We're talking with Senator Dr. Roger Marshall. Doc, I wanted to ask you about something else, and I know we've got a limited time this morning, but you voted to overturn Biden's student loan bailout just yesterday. The Senate passed his bill. Biden has already indicated that he's going to veto this. And it's already, I think most people will admit it's unconstitutional. He doesn't have the authority to just willy-nilly, forgive student loans. And I think it's asinine to expect Joe Lunchpail, a guy who either never went to college or paid off his own student loans, to pay off the loans of somebody who's, studying underwater basket weaving. And yet, this bill's likely going to go to his desk, and he's going to veto it. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys passed and what the chances are that he may or may not veto it?
Right. So this is a campaign promise from Joe Biden, is to take student loans and have other people pay for them. Forgive student loans, but have other people pay for them. Look, in Kansas, if you take out a student loan, if you take out any loan, we expect you to pay it back.
You'd think.
And that's why I went to Butler County Community College to start with. Rather than borrowing money to go to college, I chose to go to Butler County Community College on a track scholarship. Grateful for it. When we were in medical school, I chose to join the Army Reserve rather than borrow money. So we all make choices. And I think of those union workers there in the aerospace industry in Wichita who graduated from Wichita North High School, and they went out and got a job in the union. They didn't borrow any money. They made a good living. They're in good shape right now financially going into our senior years, as we say. They've got a good retirement plan going. We all made choices. We made our bed. We need to sleep in it. But Joe Biden wants to pass on $300 billion of student loan onto American taxpayers, onto hardworking Americans. Add that to your national debt, and I'm going to have no part of it. This rescission passed on the House side already. This is unconstitutional, by the way, what Biden has done. He's appropriating money. The House has rescinded it with legislation. We rescinded it on the Senate side as well. We'll send it to Joe Biden. We'll make him veto it. We want him to show America exactly the woke, liberal, socialist greenie that he really is.
U.S. Senator from Kansas, Dr. Roger Marshall, live with us this morning here on KNSS. I just want to ask you an overarching question about the debt ceiling. Is dealing with this every 2 years and a crisis fomenting, is that good government or bad government?
Well, of course, it's horrible government. It creates uncertainty. What businessmen and women don't like is uncertainty, and that's what the stock market doesn't like as well. But what they also don't like is inflation. And when the markets see that we're going to continue to light money on fire, that we're going to print money and light it on fire, these markets are going to be unstable as well. Look, this is the less of two evils. The debt ceiling versus inflation. There's a compromise between the two. And you do it by starting with lowering taxes, a strong economy, getting people back to work. 7 million American men between the ages of 25 and 45, healthy American men, have not re-entered the workforce yet. So it's fundamentals. We tackle this problem with fundamentals. We need to take care of our kids' education. We need to get back to work, put our heads down, quit worrying about all this nonsense about what's happening in China and Russia and Ukraine, secure our border. Just go back to fundamentals, John, and this country can take care of itself, and we're going to be just fine.
Doc, we really appreciate you taking. I know you guys were at it late last night. We really appreciate you taking the time to call in this morning and join us. If folks want to follow you, if they want to get in touch with you, I follow you on Twitter. I highly recommend that folks follow you on Twitter. You're at Roger Marshall MD on Twitter. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with you, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way. I think we try to condense a lot of our press releases down to Twitter and then marshall.senate.gov. Something real simple, marshall.senate.gov. And we're on the Facebook and all the Instagrams. But I think the Twitter account, Facebook, and marshall.senate.gov.
He said we just condense a lot of our press releases
I think you'd be really
for Twitter.
surprised how informative
it's a good way to get
newsletter is. My staff works really hard on condensing the good stories that you need to know as a Kansan and what's happening in D.C. Plus, we're trying to highlight some great things happening across the state.
Senator, thank you again for joining us this morning. Carry on the fight, brother.
You bet, John. Great to be with you.
There he is, U.S.